I know. I get pretty riled up when it comes to God. You know, I get pretty extreme, and that's because my experience has been extreme. My experience was extreme. My experience was profound. My experience was deep. Since that happened, it was a little over 2 years ago, I think I've read the Bible at least 4 times, and I'm starting on my 5th time. It's not that I don't know what the Bible says. Believe me, you know, I won't be able to quote you a chapter and verse, but if you tell me something, I know if it's in there. For some reason, I'm really good at knowing whether it's in there or not. And but you know, I didn't want this series to be a chapter and verse. I wanted this series to be experience. That's why I approach it a different way. That's why I'm so passionate about it. And you know, my trust and my faith is strong. He's touched me very deeply. So yeah, there's a lot of things that I trust Him. And I want to try to explain some of that because, you know, I've been talking about prayer since this series began. And I don't want to badmouth prayer in any way. And I know what I said was very controversial in the last segment. And I want to clarify it a little bit because I really get wound up sometimes. And I'm going to put the example into me because I like talking about me. I don't like talking about other people. If prayer, if I had a big group of people around me, if I had a church praying for me or whoever it might be, you know, the intercession of prayer, if you would have interceded if you would have beseeched God to intercede on all these tragedies that happened to me, I wouldn't have found Him. You would have kept me from finding Him. These tragedies are what brought me to Him. So every time you see something happening to somebody, don't immediately go, oh, no, we don't want that to happen to this person. It's bad and we should stop it, because it might not be. It might be God's way of bringing them to Him. You don't know. Maybe, you know, that's the only thing that I really want to get across to you is we don't know. We don't understand things. Sometimes what we might view as a big tragedy is really going to end up being the sweetest blessing this person's ever going to receive, because it's the reason that they found God. So don't go around trying to intercede in every situation that might draw somebody closer to God. You know, there's so many reasons to pray. One of the big reasons to pray is because God says so. You know, that's where you're going to build a relationship with Him. That's where you're going to communicate with Him, and that's where He's going to communicate with you. I mean, you know, nothing happened in my life until I started praying. And everything has happened to me since I started praying. And I have watched miraculous things happen from my prayer. And God has a way of showing me that is directly related to the prayer, because sometimes He does things so fast that I'm like, wow. And I don't really want to get into those kind of details. There's something that I do want to talk. You know, I say in these segments, oh, we're going to get to this and we're going to get to that, and I'm not going to forget anything that I said we're going to get to. We are going to get to blame and God's personality, and that's something that I want to talk about. I've read the Bible a few times, and I don't see anywhere that it talks about God's sense of humor. It's huge. He's hilarious. He cracks me up, and you know, I think He loves wild, crazy fools. I really do. I've watched these segments, you know, I've seen me get wound up, and I look at it and I laugh, and I just say, man, you are one wild, crazy fool. You know, and I think God loves wild, crazy fools with the honest and open hearts. I really do. And I think He's a wild, crazy fool too. You know, in some ways, you know. So, you know, take it for what it is. Don't get too serious on it. But I want to share with you one experience that I had, and it's very personal to me. I really, you know, I hesitate on sharing it because it is so personal with me. But I think it'll give you a view of God's sense of humor. Okay. When I first got saved, You know, I say I don't pray for specific things, but there was a time that I did. But I phrase it in such a way that anytime I ask for a specific thing, I say, if it be your will. You know, if it's your will, I would like this to happen, or for you to help this person, or you know, heal this person's heart, or whatever the situation is. And believe me, I pray for all kinds of things and all kinds of people. Don't think I don't. And it's not because I think he's wrong. It's just that I want to ask for his mercy and his grace to shine down, and that's what I do. So anyway, but to his sense of humor, and this is hilarious, and it's probably going to take up the whole segment, but I don't care. One time I was praying, and this was before I came to know Jesus in my heart and all that, but it was one of the first things that I wanted to know, because when you start studying the Word and everything, you know, you're going to run into Jesus. I had experience with God, and I wanted to know what the truth was. So I was on my knees and I was praying, and I was like God, you know, I want to know about Jesus. I want to know Jesus. I want to know the real deal. You know, is this real? Is this something that men thought up? You know, I want to know Jesus. And that same night, I added to the prayer, and I says, and if it be your will, Lord, I would like to find a nice woman. You know, I threw that in there. So I didn't think I was supposed to, but I said, if it's your will, I'd like to. And listen to my words. If it be your will, I'd like to find a nice woman. So anyway, I asked him to know Jesus and to find a nice woman. And it wasn't the next day, but the day after, I was walking down the street and I was going past this white building, and the door swung open, and a guy walks out on the porch. And you know, since I've been saved, I'm very friendly, and I talk to people. And he stepped out and he looked at me, and I was like, oh, hey, how you doing? He was like, oh, hey, how you doing? So we're walking toward each other, you know, in a greeting. And he puts his hand out, and I put my hand out, and I shake his hand. And right at the moment that he's supposed to let go of my hand, he doesn't. And I'm sitting there, and he's holding my hand, and I look in his eyes, and he's looking at me, and he says, do you know Jesus? And I'm thinking to my prayer a couple of days ago, and I thought, oh boy. And I said, well, you know, it's funny you mentioned that, because I was just thinking about that lately, you know. And he said, oh, let me tell you about it. The pastor can tell you better than I can. And he runs into the building, and I look up there, and it's a church. It's a church community building. And after a minute, this white-haired old pastor comes out, and he's talking about he used to be a bartender, and you know, one time he flirted with 2 women at the same time, so he used to be a sinner. You know, which I thought was funny. He was a bartender, and he flirted with 2 girls, so he was a sinner. He wanted to relate to me, you know. Yeah. And anyway, so he talked to me about Jesus, and he talked to me about, like, Jesus was like doing your time for you. You know, he tried to put it in terms that I could understand. And anyway, and I thought that was strange that happened. And I talked to him for a few minutes. He wanted me to go to the Bible study that he was having, but I had a prior commitment, and I told him I had a prior commitment. But I told him I would be back the next week, and I was. And I told him I'd be back next week. And I was walking away, and as I'm walking away, he says, Andre. And I turned, and he says, are you married? And I says, no, I've been divorced about 5 years. And then he says, listen to the words, well, you might find a nice woman in there. And he winks at me and points toward the door there. And I thought, oh, man, the pastor just told me I might find a nice woman in there. And he winks at me, you know. That was God talking through him. Man, I had my own words, word for word, repeated to me. Do you want to know Jesus? You might find a nice woman in there. Wink, wink, wink. And I walked away looking in the sky going, God, you have got a sense of humor. You know, I just chuckled to myself. He touched me so deeply. And as I was walking away, I thought to myself, you know, that's his way of telling me, I hear you. You know, I hear your prayers. And to prove to you that I hear your prayers, let me repeat your own words back to you, just so you'll know that I heard you. You know, and it was sometime later that I started to think, you know, I wonder if she was in there. I wonder if she was in there, and he was testing me, and he says, well, you know, he seems to have a lot of faith, so let me tell him that she's in there, and let's see what he does. And you know, but then I think, well, he knew I wasn't going to go for it. He knew, but anyway, he's so funny. That was so funny. I couldn't believe it when it happened. I just thought, God, you are a jokester, man. And he is. He's a jokester. And that's something that you're not going to read in the Bible, of how intimate he is and how funny he is. And he wants to tickle your heart. You know, he really does. It's not all fire and brimstone and you know, stiff necks in the church. He's a fun-loving God. He's a kind and merciful God, and he really wants to know you. He really wants to know you, and he wants to have a relationship with you. I mean, he wants to know you. He knows you, but he wants to know you in a relationship with him, and that's what he wants.